And one of the things Carl said was, Fran, you don't have to really deal with the politics anymore that we had to inside DNR because you couldn't breathe anything in politics or it was trouble. And so I was like freed. And then I realized the Nature Conservancy had a lot of rules too, but the key to that is you gotta know the rules so you can break them appropriately. And so I figured out they got a lobbyist, so they can lobby. So I found that all out. So Carl and I talked, well, you know what, we're missing something. We've always been missing something, and that's the ability to influence the General Assembly on things we cared about. And so we thought about it a while, and Carl said, well, you'll figure something out. So that's where Nancy comes in. So I always chat with Nancy before I'm gonna do anything silly, and she always tells me how to make it better. And she said, yeah, you gotta think about this, it could work. So the only thing I could think of was land trusts. They were all over the state, there was about 20 of them at the time. And I realized after I looked at a few of the web pages, they had board of directors that were like the movers and shakers of the community. Not only that, many of them had elected officials from the General Assembly on their boards. I thought, well, man, if they were all working together, that would be pretty powerful. So I thought, well, maybe we should try and do that. So we talked some more about it. And then I realized that it'd be like trying to herd cats, right? I couldn't go around and meet with everybody and say, is this a good idea? Because then I'd have to sort all that out. So I decided, well, maybe I should just roll the dice. So I called Carolyn Grosball. Many of you might know Carolyn. She was head of the Nature Reserves Commission for years. Her husband's Al Grosball. Many of you might know him. I says, how much would it cost to incorporate the Illinois Association of Land Trusts? That's what I originally thought we'd call it. There's a story on that you'll hear in a minute. She goes, well, Fran, it'd be like $1,000. I said, oh. Okay, I'll do it. Set it up. Yeah, so she did. So 2005, I spent $1,000, and I had a friend of mine say, Jesus, Fran, you should have invested that in Microsoft. You'd have got a better deal. So the old line about the best designed kite can't fly without a little resistance. So that proved true again. I look today, if I invested $1,000 in Microsoft 20 years ago, it'd be worth $10,000. Well, my $1,000 turned into 47 million.
Woo!
The best part of that is all you. And like Brooke said and Theron said, it's the friendships that came up all that that's really the value added. It's an amazing group of people. So that's that sort of origin story. But then to do that, I had to have a president, a vice president, I think a treasurer, and some other person to do the incorporation document. So I called up Jerry and said, do you want to just be paper president? That's all you got to do. You don't have to do nothing. And of course, I'm lying through my teeth. But then I had to get a few more. So I talked to Bruce Hannon. Some of you might know Bruce. He's deceased now. And of course, Bruce will do anything. He's just a great guy. And then there's the best part. Marilyn Campbell, she used to be head of the Illinois Audubon. Many of you might know her. She's deceased now. But she was perfect. She said what everybody else was thinking. Fran, I got too much to do. I'm too old. I do not want another thing on my plate. I said, well, you don't have to do it. It's just a paper thing. She goes, you lying to me? No, I'm telling you the truth. Once we get it, we'll have elected officials. She goes, okay. So that became, and John Summerhoff, some of you might know John, he worked down here in the National Institute. So that's how that came to be. And then you might notice that the first actual meeting was in 2006. So that's how that happened. We incorporated it first, and then we went around and talked to everybody. So for a year, I drove around and met with every land trust in the state from January 21st to May 25th. And that was fun. Those pictures you're seeing, that's from those meetings, some of them. So the one I'm going to tell you the story about was the Praire State Conservancy, February 9th. So Dave King, y'all know Dave. I go down and meet with them, and so my spiel was, if you guys joined us, you could be the most powerful conservation organization voice in the state, which turns out was true, but at the time it was kind of heresy. But anyway, at that meeting, and Dave could tell me if I'm wrong here, his memory fades, there was a lady in the audience, and the senator's name was Senator Sullivan. And she goes, well, we could do that. I'd babysit Senator Sullivan. Yeah, he'll do anything we ask him to do. So it underlined the fact that how much power land trusts had politically, especially if they organized. So that's sort of the origin story of how it actually came to be. And then we put the committee together, and these guys, I'll tell you how the name got changed and some other things.
Well, I don't have a different version, but a little elaboration of the beginning of PSCC. So, friend calls me up and he says, we have to get these people in Illinois who believe in conservation to work as a group. What should we do? And I thought, oh, well, I'm just a little mama, I got 2 kids, I'm quite truthfully trying out for the Olympics, and I don't have a whole lot of my time on my plate. But, okay, let's meet down in Springfield, his territory, because that's where the government is. So we meet down under whatever fountain outside the state capitol. Nice spring day, and Fran says, want something to eat? Yeah, I just drove down from up northern Illinois. Well, how about a hot dog? So over the hot dog, Fran and I conversed, and I didn't really know you before that too much. And well, we got to get this group together. My goal of this group getting together was a different proportion of the force of conservationists in the nation, but certainly in Illinois. First of all, we had to benefit from each other's knowledge. There were lots of people beginning to do prairie restoration, a little bit of savanna restoration. Nobody was too involved in the water at that time. But you know, where do we meet? There wasn't any general assembly for that. So that was a major motivation. At the same time, I have become involved in the early days of the Joe Davis Conservation Foundation. And my son worked for a land trust in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and he kept saying, Mom, you've got to get involved with the Land Trust Alliance. They've got it together. If you can get your land trust in Illinois to follow the standards and practices of the Land Trust Alliance and get accredited, you have a really powerful force. So I went back to JDCF in Northwest Illinois many years before Steve was on staff and pulled the organization to the stature it is now. And we, as a all-volunteer organization, went through every step of the standards and practices, and after years became accredited. And so one of my major objectives for the land trust, for the Coalition of Land Trusts in Illinois, was for every land trust to be accredited. And quite truthfully, I'm disappointed. I know that there are about 30 land trusts in Illinois, and Cynthia told me at this point in time, only 9 are accredited. And I want to put you all to task to go to your boards, whether you're all volunteer or you are staffed, to get accredited. Because if I'm a volunteer donor of land to your organization, and to tell you the truth, I've donated a lot of land to land trusts, not only in Illinois, but to other states, and I wouldn't touch a land trust that wasn't accredited. Because to me, it says you don't take yourself seriously enough to go through the process and procedure, which is tedious, but in the end, very benefiting to the organization to be accredited. So I challenge you here who represent organizations who are not accredited to put your spurs in your organization and do that. To the opposite, I am thrilled to see the people here, the diversity, that everybody doesn't have white hair like me. And, you know, there's a youth coming through here, and it's a great, great strength. So I congratulate the board I served on the board for a PSCC. Oh, I was going to tell you the name change. Well, anyway, I will. A PSCC for all these years, but I was only involved in the nitty-gritty for a while. So the name, okay. So when Fran and I are sitting around the fountain, and we've got this great name, Illinois Association of the Land Trust. Not too perky. But we didn't know, as the board at that time, how how to move from being all just a land trust and incorporating other agencies around the state, mostly public, parks, the state government, regional governments in this movement. So we decided, well, okay, let's try to find a name that is more broad than the Illinois Association of Land Trusts. And many of you older members will remember Mary Pope Hudson, who was vice president of the Land Trust Alliance at that time. And we had become good friends. And she particularly was supporting the initiative of the Donnelly Foundation to stimulate the Northeastern Illinois Land Trust in their service area, the Donnelly Foundation's service area, to become stronger. Great. But what about all the rest of us downstate, which is 99% of the state? So that was another reason to have a statewide organization. So Mary Poe and I are sitting out on my farm in Joe Davis County over listening to the toads at night and so forth, drinking wine, of course. And what do we call this thing? This is so boring. And all of a sudden it was kind of like this puppet came out of the sky and said, Praire State Conservation Coalition. Don't you see it? And I said, MP, look at this. It's telling me, coming down from the sky, we need to call this organization Praire State Conservation Coalition. And we clinked glasses and said, great. So I went to the next board meeting and I said, I have this idea. What do you guys think? And Jerry and Fran and the others said, presto. So that's our name. That's the origin story. And I will tell you, as Fran has already said, we kind of put Jerry up against the wall and said, you are the most respected individual in this state at this time of this non-governmental that's working in conservation. And you have to lead this organization. Handcuffed. And he did it. So go for it.
So the first board meeting, my job was to go get a logo and letterhead for this new organization. So Mike Bugler and I went down into his basement and created this logo, and I think it's time for you to make a new one now. So my job really was to organize herd all the cats. And our first order of business was to get the Chicago Land Trust to agree that they should be part of the whole coalition. Step back a little bit, because to kind of describe what the situation for conservation was in Illinois at the turn of the 21st century, which is when I came back from Woodstock to work at the Natural Land Institute. There were maybe only a dozen or so land trusts at that time, but new land trusts were starting to pop up all over the place. And that was the good news. The bad news was that a lot of them really didn't know what they were doing and needed some guidance. We used the Gathering Waters model in Wisconsin as what we wanted to become, both an advocacy organization and an educational outreach organization. They had the advantage that they had funding and coordination from the DNR. We really were on our own. We got a lot of help from people in the DNR. That was when the C2000 program started, and that was the first real source of acquisition fund money for land trusts that was available to land trusts, and so we took advantage of that with the help of people like Meg Bushnell, Nancy Williamson, Roger Anderson, who was really the father of the C2000 program. So we had a lot of interest in people doing a lot of different things around the state. So we started holding annual conferences and training sessions and advocating for funding. I'll tell this story. A lot people remember we had the wife of Dave Winters, who was a state representative on our board at the time. And all the C-2000 money had been allocated by the DNR to groups all over the state. And all of a sudden, the head of the Bureau of the Budget froze all the funds. And we're all panicking and going, what are we going to do? We got land that we're supposed to be closing on pretty soon. Well, luckily I had Dave Winters' personal cell phone number in my phone, and I called him up and I said, Dave, do you know what's going on? He was at some retreat down in Florida at the time, and he happened to be on the Appropriations Committee. He made a phone call, and the next day the funds were released. Everybody out in the conservation world just thought I was like God.
You are God.
All it was, I knew I had the phone number, and I called the right person to get things done. And that's what coalitions like this can do. So I joined with my colleagues, our founders, that looking around the room and seeing all these young faces, all these new people, and some old faces too, from back in the day. But I'm really, really pleased that the coalition has achieved what it's done, and I'm looking forward to seeing it do great things in the future.
We always knew we needed an executive director. There's only so much you could do with a group of really good volunteers. And even though we were all great volunteers on the board, we all also had day jobs. We were running our own organizations or working for our own organizations, and we were, trying to get Praire State scaled up as well. So, I don't know, like 15 or 16 years and nothing had happened. And I was asked to come back on the board in 21. I'm like, seriously? And so I said, I will do it if I can get Fran to come with me. And I said, we are going to raise money. We're going to raise 3 years of salary for an executive director, give whoever we hire an on-ramp so they don't have to worry about where their check's going to come from. And so Fran reluctantly agreed. We both came back on the board. We raised 3 years worth of salary in the first year and sort of banked it. We had pledges and cash. And then we asked Viv Bennett, who at the time was working for the Nature Conservancy, to lead the process of advertising and interviewing and going through the entire process of getting an executive director. Nancy, you served on that committee, and we ended up with Cynthia.
Hello.